So welcome to the Innovators Forum. This is a quickfire session with 3 different innovators' perspectives, and it's all about failure, which might sound like a bit of a downer, but as you will no doubt realise, failure is useful, important, essential even. I love a good quote, and I like this one about failure. Truman Capote said, "Failure is the condiment that gives success its flavour." So on that note, we have 3 different perspectives to get through. I'm going to introduce our 3 speakers all together and then let them take the floor. At the end of this session, we're going to take questions, so have some ready, otherwise I might pick on you at random. First, we're going to hear from the head of an organisation that's branched out into a bold new digital world and has no doubt had to overcome a few failures along the way. Please welcome the Chief Executive of Spark Digital Ventures, Rod Snodgrass. And also, any failure when you're in the aerospace industry needs to happen before your business gets airborne. So to give us his perspective on failing fast, please welcome the General Manager of Altitude Aerospace Interiors, Michael Pevan. And finally, the perspective of a company that, because it relies on the trials and failures of science, is no doubt very familiar with the concept. Please welcome the Chief Executive of Pacific Edge, David Darling.
So I guess you just want us to crack into it, right? So, good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rod Snodgrass. I look after Spark Ventures, which is a reasonably new business division within Spark. I will make a confession. I am a qualified CA, but was not that great at double entry bookkeeping. The suspense account was my favourite account back in the day. A little bit about us. We were set up 2 years ago as very much an internal incubation acceleration unit within Spark, principally with a pretty open mandate about driving growth, and we just sort of started off from there. We didn't really know how we were going to do it, what we were going to do, but we knew we did need to chase some big numbers pretty quickly with a very different way of doing it. And 2 years on, some of the things we've done, just to give you a feel, what you've seen with all the Wi-Fi on the telephone boxes, that was one of ours. Skinny mobile, big pipe broadband, Lightbox TV. We've got a new big data business called Curious that's now in market, and we've also invested in some New Zealand startups like Putty Apps, which is a mobile app business, and Vigil, which is a biometric health business. So it's 2 years in. I guess we've learnt a lot along the way, and one thing around failing fast and failing cheap is it's all part of the innovation process, and that takes you to learning. And I always think about failure as just part of the learning process, and it should be something that should be embraced. And through that time, just to give you a feel for the size of the business, we've now added hundreds of thousands of new customers, not necessarily all paying, because in digital models it's all about scaling quickly. Eight businesses and brands. We've got a revenue run rate in the tens of millions already. Margin growth, but still consuming cash 2 years in. So just to give you an idea of the investment we've put in. And through that, I guess one of the big learnings for us has been we're about to pivot our business model as well, because we've learnt that through that process we're not necessarily an incubator accelerator. What we're quickly becoming is a digital engine for Spark, where we either build new digital brands or products and services, capabilities, platforms, and increasingly acquiring and building digital talent, and particularly new mindsets and ways of doing things. So that's, I guess, a bit of a brief on who we are, and I think the key thing to take out of that is, we're still learning, and we're constantly having to rethink things we've learned only a few months ago and refigure out new ways of doing things. Just from that, I wanted to give you some quick perspectives on innovation and the innovation process in the context of large corporates, because I'm assuming most of you are from bigger businesses. The first thing I would say is I don't believe innovation or failure's a choice. It's about survival. Where we are today, particularly for businesses that are easily disrupted, and it is a case of disrupt or be disrupted. The choice is that stark, and that's because business is just moving materially faster now. 75 years ago, I can't remember the stat, businesses had a life, and measured in decades. 10 years ago, it was measured in years, and now it's sometimes measured in 1 or 2 years. And in many cases, the disrupted have been disrupted again. Facebook, for example, is in decline globally, but they're covering that up with Instagram. So the pace of change and consumer disruption driven by technology innovation is something we all need to think about. And in many cases, if you're standing still, you're already dead. You probably just don't know it. But it's pretty easy to look at if you just look at your revenues and margins. And lots of businesses sort of wish that away. But that's a pretty good lead indicator that you're end of life and you're actually in a produce-out phase unless you change. So for me, I believe change, disruption, innovation, all of those words, they're all the same thing, is sort of mission critical. And the main reason is because we are living in the digital age. We've transitioned out of the previous age. And the pace of change is now, it's operating at light speed. If you look at companies like Uber, Airbnb, they've completely disrupted whole industries by reimagining the business model and thinking quite simply about the consumer and the consumer experience and working out how to rewire business chains by using digital technologies and different business models. I think Uber's now the largest startup by valuation in the tens of billions. Apple last year, not sure if you've seen the stat, in 2014, they paid more in developer fees than Hollywood made in the box office. So, you've got one company just paying its app community more money than Hollywood now makes in total. So, that's the sea change that's going on, and you can miss it because it's just happening everywhere. So, for us, we think digital disruption is here and now. It's real, and it's actually deconstructing industries that have been around for tens, sometimes hundreds of years, and just smashing into traditional business models. And what's interesting is we've done a lot of work on this recently. It's the companies that focus on the consumer experience that are winning. If you look at Uber, Airbnb, Zipcar, all of these companies, the peer-to-peer lending networks now, they're not looking at the traditional business model and how do they digitise it. They're just using digitisation to smash the business model in the favour of the consumer, and on the way through, create a better experience, a lower cost model, less friction. So that's how we're starting to think, because if you look at the companies who resist this, that they're dead or dying, traditional print directories, HMV, you can go through the list, encyclopedias, the whole lot. Then some of the ones who beat them up, if you look at Encarta from Microsoft, now that got blown away by Wikipedia. So it's a constant change process. So in Spark, we have chosen to innovate and actually disrupt ourselves, in a somewhat managed process. And I think, to date we're going reasonably well, but we've got lots more to do. And a critical thing, when I reflect back on why that is, 2 years in, we've managed to create a lot of momentum. The first thing was we agreed quite clearly up front we need to disrupt and attack ourselves. We had a very clear mandate from the CEO and board. Our primary focus, we're not fully there yet, but we are focusing more and more on the customer and starting with user design. And user centricity, then you'll hear about user-centered design or D-School or Stanford. It's all of those things. We do embrace digital and internet-ready methodologies such as lean and agile. Have a high bias for action, which takes you to fail fast, fail cheap. And if you hear about lean, they talk about pivot, persevere, shut down. Most traditional businesses persevere to the point of shutdown. You've really got to keep looking at your business model, every few months. And quickly pivoting and working out, do you keep going, do you pivot, or do you actually just shut the thing down? We've already shut down two. Nobody knew about it because, we stood them up very quickly, tried it out, shut it down. And we believe design and digital and disruption are the three key Ds we talk about in the process. And, another thing is we're very pro-partnering. And, in the old days in telco, you owned everything from the network out to the old phone. These days, with global disruption and big over-the-top attackers, we need to think more and more about, who do we partner with or what assets do we buy? It's less about build and more about partner and buy and embracing third parties and sharing with them. And partnering means sharing risk and reward, not getting an invoice. That's a supplier relationship. So you have to start a completely different mindset. And probably one of the final key things on it too is we're very focused on talent. And what we would call future-proof digital talent. So human-centred design experts. There's not many of them around. They're still coming out of uni. Data scientists, and that's not BI people. You've got a lot of BI people who call themselves data scientists. They're quite different breeds. Agile developers, more business development people. Less sales and marketing and service. So there's quite a shift going on in what you need in talent, and there is a war for talent, and it's global. And finally, and this is a funny one for me, being quite McKinsey trained, is we do believe culture eats strategy. It's great to have a good strategy, but if you haven't got your culture right, you can't get the talent and you can't create the pace and the cadence. So those are just some perspectives for the corporates from what we're doing. It may not be right for all of you, but I would say there's things going on out there now, whereas if you're in a disruptable industry, such as telco, banking, retail, if you're not moving at pace now, you're probably actually already being run over. Now then, what I thought I'd leave you with is just some thoughts or questions or perspectives for you, as I'm assuming most of your CFOs, just things to think about within your business if you're thinking about all of this change going on. First one is you really need to reconsider your corporate strategy and the classic questions about where to play, because where you play today may not necessarily be in the right part of the value chain, given what's going on. And within that context, where do you apply investment? Then in your market strategies, the whole how to play, do you partner? Because sometimes your competitors are also your partners if you're thinking about different industry models. Your technology strategy, because there's so much innovation happening at the edge, with cloud and apps and mobile. Just about anything you need now you can rent in the cloud. So big, heavy builds, depending on the size of your business, are not necessarily the right way to go, and they're probably the wrong way. So a lot of our businesses are all in the cloud. We have no hard physical assets other than a core network. We only use Macs, Wi-Fi, Google. We don't use any traditional stuff. We don't use fixed line. Blasphemy in a telco, but you just have to operate at pace and be agile. Obviously, as I said, think about your investment strategies, and particularly as you move to digital, over-investing in hard assets is probably not a smart thing because all the value is moving quickly towards the consumer. So if you want to stay relevant, you have to push your investment and your strategies towards them. And also your operating model within the context of those and partnering models. And I think importantly, a big thing for many businesses is your talent model and who are the people you're going to need 5 years from now, because you better be cultivating them now. They're probably still at high school, a lot of these guys. I think the traditional education model probably is not quite right, so we are looking at trying to maybe get people out of high school, what used to be sixth form or year 12, because having them lost in the system for 3 years isn't necessarily the best thing either. So for us, we're looking for cognitive scores, their maths scores, those sorts of things. So it's quite a different way. It may sound all a bit weird, but just want to give you a bit of a feel for what we're doing within, I guess, the context of one of New Zealand's largest businesses on the edge of that, where we've got a bit of a mandate to disrupt and attack within a semi-controlled environment and what we're doing. Thanks.
All right. I thought we were going to have a few questions, but I'll get up here. I can see you all a bit better. Look, I've got a confession to make as well. I'm not an accountant, but I do deal in numbers, and I think inherently this is why I appreciated the invite to come along here as an engineer by profession, and what we do with numbers is such an important part of what we deliver. That's been illuminating over the last 10 years, being involved more closely with the financial community and understanding how they deal with numbers, and particularly the very important ones of how we get money to do all the cool stuff as engineers we want to go and do. Just make sure I'm pushing the right button. Wait a minute. Am I pushing the right button? Oh, yeah, the big green one. There's lots of dots on it. Look, the first thing I thought I'd talk to is just a little bit of a sense of what AIM Altitude's business is and a little bit of our history. You may have read just recently we were part of Air New Zealand. We're a startup within the Air New Zealand group. We'd been in there 6 years, and we'd grown quite substantially from a small team of engineers, sort of in around 10 dozen people, up to 100. And we'd expanded our business quite massively, given it's a reasonably conservative sort of industry. And we'd moved from primarily having Air New Zealand as a customer to them being less than 10% of our business. What we do primarily is provide aircraft cabinetry, we do some other services of integrating that cabinetry, and we do it for Boeing aircraft and Airbus aircraft. And the customers on the whole are airlines, although we have done VIP business type customers. Now, so initially you sort of sense, well, airline cabinetry is something that your local kitchen maker could probably do, but it's not really. It's a pretty substantial amount of engineering goes into it. It's a very complex bit of analysis to substantiate it for the regulators. And it's basically because the aircraft interior is a system of safety first, and then we sort of make it comfortable for passengers. As uncomfortable as it sometimes ends up being for those very long haul flights, first and primary focus of the industry is making sure we get you to the other end. It means we have a very regulated and controlled manufacturing process. And, for the auditors amongst you, or most of you seem to have come through audit when you talk to CFOs and finance types, we are very much an audited industry, right back to the base material. The aluminium comes out of the smelter, it gets pulled off to become part of the aerospace supply chain. So what that does do is it creates very high barriers to entry. And therein lies the challenge of being an innovator in a conservative industry. So just to break it up a bit, here's some imagery of some product we've provided for you in New Zealand. Many of you have flown in their premium classes would be familiar with this. It's in the door to entrance area. It's a kitchen, it's a bar unit, it's a servery unit, it's a branding exercise. But first and foremost, it's a system of safety. So what I'd like to talk to is about, failing fast is pretty challenging and it's very hard to innovate in a very conservative aerospace engineering environment. I can't reinforce how conservative it is, and those who like their statistics, we have to design things with probability of failure of 10 to the minus 39 as far as causing death, accident, injury, and it's sort of just a horrendously large number. And therefore the whole system is based around providing that level of safety. So trying to be innovative in that space is quite challenging. So one of the first things we did before we started on this journey is we took a very long-term strategic view, because it's an industry with very long-term views. But we also knew we were going to have a few failures. And in the early days, we failed by going in the wrong parts of the industry. In the later days, we failed by potentially being a little bit over-ambitious. But, one of the first things we did when you look at a strategic view, if you want to innovate somewhere where you're going to have a chance of success. And you've got to understand the key drivers of your industry first to see where there's a niche. And for us, it became pretty obvious, even for a bunch of engineers, that fuel and capital costs were continually driving the purchase of new aircraft in the last decade, although the fuel elements come off a bit. But the really exciting thing from our perspective is this is an industry with an underlying demand that's been ahead of GDP since the 1970s, and this is Airbus and Boeing data. So we knew long term it was a good industry to get ourselves involved in, to move into, but we also knew it was extremely conservative and hard to get through those barriers. And the long time horizons also sort of was a bit interesting, because most investors, as you're well aware, don't tend to have such long horizons. Although there are some governments, and the Singaporeans and a lot of the European governments invest in aerospace with very long time horizons. We came from an airline that was, especially in the early 2000s, was fighting to recreate itself, and long time horizons weren't probably not on Ralph Norris's horizon. So we had to get our heads around how can we play in this environment. So the first thing we did is go find a niche. And in the early days, we found a niche and it didn't work. We decided to have a crack at not designing wings. That was just a little bit ambitious and capital intensive, but we thought we'd go and try and design bits for aeroplanes. It didn't work. For engines on aeroplanes. It didn't work because fundamentally there were big incumbent players. So avoid your incumbent players. That's where we got to aircraft interiors. There were a lot more smaller players, and there was definitely a gap in the market. The other thing is we felt that there was a complexity in it that also made it hard for others to enter, because, again, these are systems of safety, and the engineering in it was just as intense as the wings. So, all good, we found our niche, let's go play in it. We worked out we weren't going to be any good at engines, not because we weren't good at engineering, but we couldn't handle the commercial side of it. So we had to convince key stakeholders, and those key stakeholders are the regulators and Boeing. How do we do it? Well, we had to be different. We're in a part of the world where there isn't big aerospace. It's all in the Northern Hemisphere. We didn't have big manufacturing facilities, and Rob Fife at the time wasn't going to give us a lot of capital. He said, just go out and prove you can be a business. So what we had to do is we had to do things differently. So we, through our engineering, now at it and said, look, we can be smarter at analysing these products. our competitors have become lazy because there really weren't any other competitors to them, and it opened up opportunities for us, first on Air New Zealand aeroplanes, but then for other airlines. We also did something else, and I think the previous speaker talked to it as well, was we understood that design in aircraft is not just about engineering, although, of my 90 staff, 70 are engineers. We also understood that design is about bringing industrial designers in. It's about design thinking. It's about looking at things differently than the industry. So that was how we broke into the industry. But we did have failures, and the failures were sometimes our customers weren't up for being that radical. They liked the comfortable grey box that the competitor was providing, and possibly a slightly better price too. So I think for us, the failures were about understanding how to be different in the marketplace, but we had to take those risks. So once we worked out where we could play, we had to do it quite quickly. Again, an aircraft, new type of aircraft, say it's a 787 program, that's an 8-10-year development program before the first airplane plays. We only had a couple of years. So what we did is we experimented in small ways. We experimented by doing our substantiation different for the regulators. We experimented by putting new materials in. But the underlying product had to remain the same. So we had a choice. Radical innovation, well, we were radical from how we did our business, but we were incremental in how we did our technology change because we were an industry that couldn't accept it. One of the things that we did learn, though, is sometimes we got over-ambitious. We changed too many things, even if it was incrementally, and we got ourselves in trouble. So it was a harsh lesson. There were programs where we lost money because literally we were trying to do too much for the customer in a market that wasn't prepared to pay for it. So, look, I'll give you an example of some of the products we created. This is the rear of the premium business class in Air New Zealand. We do the cabinetry in the back. We do things as basic as galleys for freighters, but it's for a freighter company that has the biggest fleet in the world. So even though it's a small product, it's got lots of volume in the aircraft sense. We've moved into the Chinese market, and we're providing cabinetry for the first class of a Chinese carrier. We're doing some cool stuff for the British, British cool. This is a Virgin Atlantic. I am assured that this bar will get into a movie at some stage. It's got 400 feet of lighting. Now, our competitors couldn't even imagine putting lighting, let alone under something that looks like it's come out of Star Trek. This had levels of failure in it. There's too much technology change. It took us far too long to do it. We were successful technology-wise, but commercially it hurt. So again, we tried to do too much too soon, but we felt we sort of had to if we were going to break in somehow. And this is a basic class divider, but again, it's innovative in the way that it's light versus a competitor's product. And this is an earlier bar unit we did. Finally, just from a CFO's perspective and from my perspective as a managing director, one of the big challenges as we move into a private equity ownership model is understanding what we need to measure. And we got hit with return on funds employed, margin, gross margin, net margin, enterprise value. I think I came to the conclusion that it's whatever the stakeholders need, and make sure you have a good finance guy who can provide it. So, look, in summary, not all our technical successes had matching financial returns, but we took risks. Some of them were too big, and I think now we've learnt that if we understand what our stakeholders need from us, as far as their metrics go, and we do more incremental sort of change rather than radical, we've got a good long-term successful business ahead of us. So, in summary, thank you.
Thanks, guys. It's nice to be here with you today. I'm not an accountant either, I'm a scientist. We've got that presentation up, guys. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to tell you about Pacific Edge, and then I'd like to make a couple of comments about investing in innovation in New Zealand. So Pacific Edge is a cancer diagnostics company. We build novel diagnostics for early detection and management of cancer. It's a very disruptive business. We're playing in the space that is very staid, and people want to know that there's some certainty about the technology and how it works, and it's repeatable and highly safe, I guess, would be an appropriate measure. So every company has a catalyst, and our company was the death of a 6-year-old girl that died from a complication related to her cancer. And it came about at the time when the human genome was just being sequenced. And the parents asked the question, if we had better tools, could we have got a better outcome for this girl? And so we set up this company, and at the time, nobody was doing this. There was no certainty that you could do this. And so we wanted to use the sequencing of the human genome, and we wanted to go in there. We wanted to find genes that are overexpressed in tumours and relative to normal tissue. So we collected tumour tissue and normal tissue from a large number of patients in 5 cancers, and we spent 3 years building a gene expression database. So after 3 years, we still don't know whether we have a product here or not. So we went into the gene expression database, we shut it off, and we went in there and we pulled out prototypes in all 5 of our cancers. That was gastric, melanoma, colorectal, endometrial and bladder cancer. And our original business plan was to take these prototypes and take them to a blue chip company in the United States or in Europe and let these experienced people take this technology to the market. But when we went to see them, they said, damn nice research, but we don't do this. Keep going. We want more risk out of the product, and then we'll be prepared to pay you a little bit more for your business, and we'll scoop you up. So by the time we'd finished this and gone right through to a clinical study, we were on the cusp of taking it into the market. So we said, right, let's launch this into our home market, New Zealand and Australia, and then take it out to the world's largest market, which is the biomedical market, which is the US. Oops. So at Pacific Edge, we inherently understood that molecular diagnostics were going to be the way of the future, and that people would pay to get better knowledge about themselves faster, about themselves and their disease. And you can see here that Kermit here is learning a little bit about his anatomy from the diagnostics. So as I outlined, it was a long cycle time for us. We started in 2001. We listed on the stock exchange in 2002 to get access to the capital markets to grow our business. It's kind of an Australasian model, as you all know. And we progressed through to getting those prototypes after 3 years. And then the rest of it's about developing from a prototype to a commercial product in the medical industry. Well, you think the aeronautical industry is tough. You want to try it in the medical industry. They're very conservative people. And we launched our product in New Zealand and Australia, our beta markets, in 2012. We followed up quickly with building a customised lab in Hershey, Pennsylvania in the United States. It's got a 265,000 test per annum capability throughput. We custom designed it in New Zealand, went over there and bolted it all in place. And then we got regulatory approval in March of 2013, and we launched in July of 2013. So it was a rapid cycle for us. So why did we do this? Well, we knew from the literature that if you can find cancer at an early stage, then the prognosis for the patient is much higher than if you find it at a late stage. And this bladder cancer data shows that for a localised disease, the survival at 10 years is 90% relative to 3% for a distant disease. But the challenge for the clinicians is that the technology in cancer is poor. And the outcome of that is that disease detection is late stage. So there's a huge opportunity to be disruptive and put in place this technology that was accurate, fast, low cost, and more importantly was non-invasive and was going to give the patient a better outcome. That was really important. So we built our first product, which is CX Bladder Detect, and it was very accurate and it met all of the clinical standards that you required. It finds tumours from the bladder all the way up to the kidney. Anything that's shedding tumour cells will go to the bladder, and we'll take a 5 ml sample of urine from the bladder non-invasively, and we'll find that tumour. We have a very comprehensive intellectual property position around that IP, so we own the genes that are related to that disease and all those disease outcomes, and we own the buffer that protects the signal that sits in the urine, and we have a black box, not a bit different to the black box that my friend over here has in his planes. The other great thing is that the clinicians told us that not only did they have a large unmet need, but there were many unmet needs in their clinical pathway. And so I just listed a few of them here. But not only does this technology satisfy the urologists, but it enhances patient compliance, because one of the alternative technologies is to get a black rubber hose, the diameter of your little finger, up your weenie to have a look around the inside of your bladder. And nobody wants that. And bladder cancer is a bad disease. It has 70% recurrence, and of those recurrences, 30% of them progress. So you get to see that black rubber hose a lot of times in your lifetime, and some people go on to be monitored for the rest of their life. And this technology can save healthcare systems a lot of money. So in order to take that technology from the gene database through to the market, we had to have another innovation. We needed to protect that RNA in the urine and ship it thousands of kilometres to one of these these two labs that we have, these dedicated labs. So we designed the system, and we get it built for us in Europe, and that little tube lying on the floor there has a buffer in it that's trade secreted, and that buffer protects the RNA. So as soon as you get the urine sample, you get it into that tube, and you can send it on one of Air New Zealand's jets all the way to New Zealand or to the United States. And it's safe for up to 2 weeks and up to 30 degrees Celsius. So it's a tricky little bit of kit there. It looks simple, that you pee in that cup, you put the lid on it, you take that tear tab off, there's a recess in the lid, you put that tube into the recess, and there's a rubber covered needle inside the recess that pokes a hole in that rubber septum. The tube's under vacuum, it sucks out 5 mils, the nurse doesn't get any on her hands, and she puts that into a courier bag, and it's on Air New Zealand and off to Dunedin. So the report format was really simple too. So we take this quantitative measure of these genes in the urine, we run it through a fancy algorithm that sits in a black box, which is also in Dunedin, that no one can get access to, and they can access it from one of the labs, but you can't touch it. And it produces a score, 0 to 1. Closer you go to 1, the higher the probability there is that you have cancer. And you can see on this report that this patient has bladder cancer. So as they tell you in business school, one of the fastest ways to make money is to take another product down the same pipe to the same customer, because you invested a lot of money in capturing that guy. So we launched CX Bladder Detect in 2012. We launched in December last year CX Bladder Triage. We will launch this year CX Bladder Monitor, and we will follow up in 2016 with CX Bladder Predict. It's very difficult to put one of these technologies into the market, and it's even rarer and more difficult to put more than one into the market. By the end of 2016, we'll have 4 in the market. So this is a fairly big thing for us, and it's a great series of innovations for the people that do this. There's 20 people in Dunedin, there's 20 in the United States selling this product into urologists and healthcare systems. It's a one-stop shop for urologists. So the markets we're in right now, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States, obviously, because it's the world's largest market and healthcare market, there are 7 million people presenting with hematuria, which is blood in your urine. That's the thing we're looking for. That's the thing we address. That's symptomatic of bladder cancer. And of those 7 million, 1 million of them get an extensive workup, which is invasive and expensive, and it costs the healthcare system in excess of $1 billion. It's actually approaching $1.5 billion now. So bladder cancer, highly recurrent, progressive disease. You get scoped a lot, you get monitored a lot, has the highest total medical cost of any cancer, approaching $240,000 per patient from detection to death. So it's a real issue. In the United States, we segmented up that market. We targeted the large urology groups, the large integrated healthcare providers such as Kaiser Permanente. We've announced that we're working with those guys. They have 9.5 million lives under coverage, a very, very big customer, twice the size of New Zealand on a good day. And also the large customers such as the VA, 20 million people that are being monitored and looked after that have a high proportion of bladder cancer. So sales opportunities, strategic opportunities, more products, more markets, more sales channels and more customers. So just to close out, just a couple of pointers on innovation in New Zealand. We're in a great country, we're renowned for our innovations, and these sorts of innovations have a sustained investment, which is a very important point, and there are many innovations that sit behind these successes, and I chose a couple in the agrarian space as opposed to this biomedical space. However, in order to do this, we need to have a thriving venture capital industry to make sure we've got the funds, and we've had a couple. We've had the New Zealand Seed Fund and we've had the Venture Investment Fund, and I've got some stats here from VIF themselves. And interestingly enough, you can see that here they say that 39% of their investments earned a 2x on what was invested, which is small bananas relative to what happens in the US-based market, where they're looking for a 2-year return on their investment and a 5x on their investment. So in startups, the stats work against you. 85% of the businesses fail in the first 5 years, 25% die, and 15% do well. So the question is, do you really have a strong business proposition? We know that incremental change won't bring about the value proposition that our investors are looking for. It's not good enough to stick more pigs on your motorbike. You need to have a scale opportunity, and so this is a slide for Gareth Morgan. We're not sure Gareth has got any money in this company or not, but it's a winner. There are 57 million cats in the United States to go with the 327 million people. So I think it has promise. It's certainly innovative. You need to get a working prototype quickly so that investors can see how this is going to translate into cash, and for an innovation company you want more cash. And obviously this was the precursor to the Apple iPod. I think Rod's looking at this now. He's going to do a few things with it and stick it into a phone, I think. Our first real prototype, you can see it just sitting there in front of that blue arrow. And when you amplify it using PCR, which is one of the tools we use, you can see we've now got a product here. It's an exciting product that's sitting there. It's framed up in that box. And we have a problem because people have trouble visualising what our prototype can look like. So, albeit it's difficult to see, the clinicians get it. It is disruptive. It is happening. We are generating revenue. We're growing quickly in the United States. And I just wanted to leave you with one last slide to close it out. And this is a feature that is very important to all innovation companies. And as they tell you at MIT, at the Entrepreneurship School, cash is more important than your mother. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, Rod, Michael and David. We are running just a little bit behind time, so if anyone needs to be in the next round of roundtable seminars, that's the CFO and the cloud and managing transformation and change, this is your opportunity to sneak out and go to that now. We're going to take just maybe one question before we move on, so if you do want to take the opportunity to throw a question at one of these three, now is your opportunity. Don't let there be a tumbleweed through the room. Cue tumbleweed. Maybe I can kick this off. And I'll start with you, David, most recently on your feet. When we talk about failing fast, you have a really long timeline before you even had a product in the market. So is there a risk when you talk about failing fast and cutting your losses of cutting them too soon?
Absolutely. You certainly have to hang in there. You've got to appraise the perspective that you have a high probability of coming out with a commercial product at the end of the process. If you can think about 30,000 genes, when we start drawing down our patents, it's on 2,000 genes, and then we're down to 300, and then down to 40, and we ended up with 6 genes in a prototype, and we went to Japan, we pulled 6 cohorts of patients and brought the urine to New Zealand and analysed it, and only then did we realise that we had a product. So yeah, it's a long cycle. That gets you the product prototype, and then it takes a long time to develop a quality product for the medical industry.
Conversely, though, I suppose for you, Rod, do you have the luxury of being a bit nimbler? Because, as you say, you don't kind of have those physical assets or, people in white coats beavering away in a lab. Yeah, look, it's horses for courses. We're in quite a different industry, so we probably would have a product from idea into market between 12 and 24 months, but to Dave's point, you're still running all the same sort of processes. You're going through early discovery, you go to prototype, and you're constantly in a development cycle. And I think the key point is it's very iterative. There's a lot of co-creation goes on, and it comes down to different industries have different time horizons. So we're in that 1 to 2 years. We want to have it in market because that's what the outside world's doing to us. Michael, do you ever look back on an idea and say, we actually pulled the pin on that too quickly, that maybe if we'd persevered, we could have made something of it?
Yeah, we've got several of them still sitting in the back shed, so to speak, and I think one of the most important pieces of advice we got, and we were taken up to Silicon Valley by Trade and Enterprise, was by an old crusty VC guy, and he said, look, if you've got a great idea, it's a good chance no one else has thought of it. Don't rush it to market, nurture it, make sure you get it right, and then get out there, otherwise the fast followers will get you. Unfortunately, we sort of had previous history of exactly doing that. We got out in the market too quick, and the fast followers took us out. So yeah, there is definitely examples of that.
Any burning questions from the floor? I reluctantly throw it out there. Okay, please put your hands together for Rod, Michael and David.